Hi, welcome to Group 17's presentation on ELT, Evaluating Online Educational Games with Current Design Models. My name is Kate Johnson, and my teammates will introduce themselves shortly. For this presentation, two online educational games created by Mission US were reviewed and evaluated using the motivational evaluation for online instructional games provided in the assignment. Mission US creates and offers games and accompanying curriculum for young learners to have an interactive way to learn history. The games that were reviewed were City of Immigrants, which focuses on the challenges and experiences of a young Jewish immigrant at the turn of the 20th century in New York City, and No Turning Back, which focuses on the experience of a teenage girl in the Mississippi Delta during segregation and voter intimidation of the early 1960s.
Hi, I'm Katie Yamashiroya. The game description for City of Immigrants provided by Mission US is that players navigate New York's Lower East Side as Lena, a young Jewish immigrant from Russia. Trying to save money to bring her parents to America, she works long hours in a factory for little money and gets caught up in the growing labor movement. Though the curriculum does not suggest that teachers have learners play the entire game in one sitting, if they did, it would take between 60 and 90 minutes to complete.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Tracy. The game description for No Turning Back, which was also provided by Mission US, is that the learner is playing a game set in 1960. It's a first person game similar to the one Katie is describing, where you're a 16-year-old girl, Verna Baker, who was born and raised in the Mississippi Delta. She moves to the city of Greenwood to start high school, and it's during the civil rights movement when it's gaining momentum. So the game is really about how she takes part in the struggle for freedom and equality. As with City of Immigrants, the curriculum doesn't suggest that you sit down and do this all in one sitting. And there's a teacher guide, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And the learning outcomes are also the same for all of the Mission US games, but obviously each one is a little bit tailored when you dig into the teacher guide.
So, starting with City of Immigrants, it situates players in a fantasy world and is challenging enough, in my opinion, to keep players engaged and interested. The rules and goals are clearly presented, and the game was easy to learn. On the landing page, before you start the mission, players have the option to watch a video or open a PDF containing the top 5 things to know before you play, which I found to be very helpful. Even if players skip it jumps right into the mission, the same information is automatically displayed right after the prologue. There was one exception to this where during one challenge during the game, there was a sub game that included 8 different steps and rules. It was pretty convoluted. It had nothing to do with advancing in the game. And I found it to be very confusing, and I can't even describe it because it was so confusing. And as Wharton states, if learning to play the game takes too long, learning is inefficient and frustrating, such as it was for me for that one part. The game is single player, so no social learning component is contained within the game itself.
As Katie mentioned, you have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the game before you start. But one thing we noticed was that these rules are the same for all of the games. So there's no specific rules to each of the games, which I do agree led to some confusion with the in game challenges as far as your knowledge about how to actually interact with them, and they didn't seem particularly relevant to the learning experience. So the game starts with the top 5 things you need to know before playing, and it really talks about the role-playing nature of the game. So it's not the same as other learning experiences that have been gamified, and that there are no right or wrong answers. So as you navigate the game, your decisions will affect the outcomes of the game, but there's no real right or wrong answer. So for those players who might be more competitive, there's really no way to win or lose the game.
Okay, so while playing City of Immigrants, Lena is presented with a series of questions and she has a selection of choices to make. Each question is presented audibly and in written form, which appears above the character asking the question. There are typically 2 to 3 choices for Lena to choose from, which are clearly displayed on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This process gives players some control, but you're limited to the choices provided by the game. It is, however, rather engaging. I will say, too, that even though your choices are limited, it still kind of guides you in a way that you most likely would move forward anyway. But it would have been nice to be able to think outside of the box. And when you have 3 things to do and not enough time to do it, you can, pull an all-nighter and try and finish everything. The production value doesn't compare to games designed for entertainment, but it is pretty impressive given that this is an educational game. The graphics and animations were attractive, as well as the background music and narrations. Also, players have volume controls if they want to increase, decrease, or eliminate the music, sound effects, and/or voices.
One thing to add as far as the visuals and sound effects that I really appreciated about the aesthetics is it did really pull from historical pieces. So there were audio recordings of real individuals from the historical context, as well as photographs of different historical events that actually took place, which I found very engaging and appealing.
The player receives explanatory and corrective feedback on their performance after making choices. The character with whom Lena's interacting provides feedback verbally, such as, "You are practical like mother," or by providing visual cues, such as a smile or a grin, so you know whether you did something that was acceptable or not. And the player isn't told what they choose was right or wrong, like Megan said earlier, but there is an explanation of the consequences of their choices. Also, there are a series of badges to earn depending on the learner's performance. As badges are earned, they appear on the screen with a check mark and explains what was done to earn it. It wasn't evident to me at first that the skills acquired in this role-playing experience could be applied to the real world, but after thinking about it for a bit, it was clear. In life we make choices, and choices can impact our fate. Sometimes it doesn't matter what we choose. Things happen that are completely out of our control.
I would agree with Katie. My game was structured very similarly. And so, again, there were some choices that had clear immediate impacts, and others that it sort of didn't seem to matter which choice you made, you progressed to the next stage of the game. But certainly, I ranked it lower as far as applicability to my real life. But again, when Katie described how she had thought about it a little bit differently, I could see how, again, sometimes the choices we make do have a huge impact on our future, and other times, they might be smaller choices or less impactful. So, one important thing that we mentioned at the beginning was the teacher's guide. And one thing that we noted that this would be very helpful for the particular audience that this game is probably made for is to supplement classroom activities.
In conclusion, some of the positives for the game structure were that the rules were easy to follow, goals were clearly presented, and the games provided all necessary information before the playing process. They also provided enough support to accomplish game tasks. In regards to game involvement, game situates the learner in a fantasy world, engages learners in the playing process, allows role play, keeps learners interested throughout the playing process, and was fun to play. And finally, in the game appeal, graphics were attractive, animations and audio elements were also attractive.